This is not another ecom podcast. I'm Ian Kaneshiro. Amazon sellers around the globe find themselves in similar positions, so caught up in the whirlwind of sourcing, inventory management, and pricing that sometimes crucial aspects can get neglected, like financial admin and bookkeeping. Without a proper strategy and know-how, your financials can be a tangled web, and they can take a back seat. And this is a common pitfall that Amazon sellers can have, which have dire consequences. On today's episode, we have Nathan Hirsch, a seasoned entrepreneur who's turned the less than glamorous side of entrepreneurship, like bookkeeping and hiring, into a science. Nathan is at the helm of Ecom Ballads and Outsource School, where he is dedicated to simplifying these critical aspects for e-commerce and digital businesses. His journey from co-founding freeup.net with just $5,000 investments and scaling it to $12 million yearly at the point of exit in 2019 is a testament to his expertise and innovative approach to entrepreneurship. Now, Nathan's mission is to help Amazon sellers and e-commerce entrepreneurs avoid the pitfalls of neglecting bookkeeping and ensuring that their businesses are built on a solid, sustainable foundation. So Nathan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, Ian, thanks so much for having me. I know I rescheduled on you a few times. I'm a new dad, so bear with me, but I'm happy we finally got this going.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad that you're on. And, I think that especially being a new dad and running businesses, our audience can relate, especially in the e-commerce world. We find that people are really at this intersection of their professional and personal lives. So I'm sure there's a lot of different things we can relate to there. But, I have a lot of questions to ask you about, bookkeeping, especially in the e-commerce space. But before we jump into that, is there anything else you'd like to share that I didn't touch on your background or on Ecom Balance or any of the other ventures that you're working on?
I mean, I was a former Amazon seller. I started selling back in 2008, 2009. I had to be one of the first few thousand Amazon sellers. I was selling toys and baby products back when Amazon was becoming more than just a bookstore. And Connor and I sold $25 million on Amazon from 2008, 2009 to about 2015, 16. And we built that whole business using virtual assistants and freelancers because we were in college and college kids were pretty unreliable. And that led us to FreeUp. And we've been in the e-commerce space for a while, building a lot of B2B businesses, whether it's Ecom Balance or Outsource School. We have an SEO business where we work with a lot of e-commerce service providers to do their blog and SEO called Trio SEO. So we've definitely been in this space for a while and we've seen it all. And we try to build businesses that help solve the problems that we had in our own businesses. I mean, we've never had real jobs outside of college jobs and some internships. And when we were entrepreneurs for the first time, we didn't understand hiring. We didn't understand bookkeeping. We didn't know all these different systems and processes that you needed to have. And I think a lot of times you get into this shiny object syndrome where you're constantly trying to find that latest trend, like what Amazon's changing, how do I do what everyone's talking about? And we've always found that when we simplify business into good hiring, good finances, and understanding numbers and making good SEO and marketing decisions, that's what really helps us grow and build a sustainable business more than the shiny object. So that's what we like to focus on and try to make it simpler for other entrepreneurs and e-commerce sellers.
Yeah, I think that's a really, interesting path that you've taken to this point. Not having what you said, quote unquote, a real job is something that, I think a lot of people really want to get to, having a job that provides the flexibility. But what I would argue is that these are indeed real jobs. You just didn't have the real experience when you're diving into like the nitty gritty, especially on the admin side. When I look at YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, you have a lot of people out there saying, what you do is you go into TJ Maxx and you buy low and you sell high and that's how you do it. And then from the arbitrage side, you move to wholesale and it's as easy as that. And I think that there are a lot of truths to that aspect of, buy low and sell high. But what we can easily forget about, what we're going to be talking about today is, this admin side of things that we don't know how to do when we're starting out. As a couple of college kids trying to, scale an Amazon business and eventually move into, the B2B services space, what was kind of the catalyst where you're like, oh crap, the unsexy side of Amazon of running a business is really catching up to us and we need to, make a change and start focusing on it?
Yeah, I mean, talking about bookkeeping specifically, I remember my parents telling me, hey, you got to pay taxes now. You're making a good amount of money on Amazon. And meeting with my first accountant, CPA, and chatting with him and him pushing me to do monthly bookkeeping. And I didn't even know that was a thing, that I should be doing it every single month. And I tried to avoid it as much as possible. I started off just dumping it on my CPA at the end of every year. And then I tried doing it myself every single month and wasting a lot of time and not doing it correctly anyway, and just had to pay him to fix everything. Then I tried hiring college kids. My business partner, Connor, one of the first jobs I hired him for was logging into QuickBooks and manually entering transactions. I would hand him a statement of all these purchases we would make on 5 different credit cards. And these were thick statements. And online banking was maybe a thing, but I just wasn't that familiar with it. So I would hand him manual statements and he would just type in every single transaction. And that's what I would pay him to do. But he wasn't a bookkeeper either. So all the work that he did just had to get redone. Then I hired a bookkeeper to do it every single quarter. And that was way better. But I quickly realized that I had no idea how my business was doing until 3 months later. And then finally, I hired a bookkeeper every single month, and I had a good grasp of how my Amazon business was doing. Fast forward ahead to FreeUp, when we had the idea for it and we built our website and we were pumped to be doing a B2B business, we hired a bookkeeper from day one. We said, hey, we're not going to go through that again. We're going to find a really good person. We went through a few really bad bookkeepers that were unreliable in that first month or two, and we were quick to fire them. And then we found Marius, one of the best hires we ever made, best decisions we ever made. And not only did it help us sell the business 4 years later when we went through due diligence and had 4 years of immaculate books, it helped us make good decisions every single month based on what their numbers were telling us. It helped us say, hey, we're making a lot of money on PPC freelancers. Let's hire more of them. Or, hey, we're wasting a lot of money on these softwares. Let's build it ourselves. So it helped us really on a month-to-month basis make those decisions. And now every company we started, and we seem to be starting a new business every single year, we don't start it unless we have a bookkeeping process in place from day one. We don't believe in, hey, wait in the first year or do it yourself for the first 6 months. Our entire mentality on that is completely flipped.
That's really interesting. So so what I'm hearing is that, DIY bookkeeping should not be a thing in your business. When we're talking, and, you're talking about from your background, which is specifically, or partially is, hiring and putting the right people in the right place. Outsourcing is a key, and outsourcing doesn't always mean overseas or somewhere there, but outsourcing also means, hiring a professional, delegating to a professional. And so DIY is completely, off the table in your eyes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're starting a business, there's certain things that you need, right? You got to create an operating agreement. You got to have business bank accounts. And for us, a bookkeeper is part of that. We won't start a business unless we factor in that we're hiring a bookkeeper and we're paying for it from month one. And the truth is, you're not going to go out of business because of your bookkeeping expense. If you're small, you're a new business, bookkeeping is going to be relatively cheap. We're talking hundreds of dollars a month. You will go out of business if you don't understand your numbers and you're just guessing and you're making decisions based off randomness. And my other argument is you should never go out and take a course on how to become a bookkeeper or how to use QuickBooks. That's a terrible use of your time. You should never be doing your own bookkeeping. Your time in that first 6 months, year of the business is so important. It needs to be focused on hiring, on strategy, on launching your product, whatever it is, not on bookkeeping. And even if you do it yourself, 9 out of 10 times, you're just going to have to pay someone to redo it later. And cleanup always takes more money and more effort than just doing it right and hiring a bookkeeper from day one. Even if you were a CPA or a bookkeeper in a past life, I would still argue it's a terrible use of your time as an entrepreneur. And veteran entrepreneurs know this. People who start businesses, people who have launched Amazon brands before, they're not doing their own bookkeeping. It's the new entrepreneur that says, hey, I don't want to add that extra expense. I'm going to take 10 hours every single month and do it myself. And they're going to realize at some point that was a bad decision. And I like to try to get people to avoid that from day one.
Yeah, I guess that really makes sense. A lot of people, especially in our space, live and die by the book traction, and where they talk about working in the business, working on the business and not in the business. And I think that's a really clear point. And I think one of the things that jumps out to me is that, when you're early on, bookkeeping is rather simple because you don't have so many complicated expenses and coming in and out, and you generally have, 1 or 2 revenue streams that are going in. And so, that makes sense that it's rather cheap in the beginning and that price does kind of scale as you scale, or that cost, I should say, scales as you scale. But that also makes sense that, once it's built in, when it's easy, it's efficient. When something's efficient, it's cost efficient. And so in the long run, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and you're going to have to pay for it anyway. I mean, I've seen people who just haven't done their bookkeeping for the past year, 2 years, 3 years, and you're not going to find any bookkeeper who can just catch it up really cheaply and really quickly. That's going to be a project that takes months and months and months. It's going to take a lot of your effort and time to go back and figure out what certain transactions are and dig up documents and dig up statements. So you're not going to save time by pushing it off. And it's expensive. The cleaning up a mess that you made or going back that long is not going to be cheap. So it's always cheaper to just do it from day one. And I've never met an entrepreneur who said, man, I regret having clean and organized books and hiring a bookkeeper from the beginning. It just doesn't happen.
Most definitely. In terms of one of the things you mentioned earlier was, you had hired a couple of, bad bookkeepers. What makes a bad or good bookkeeper in the e-commerce line of business specifically?
Yeah, and that's a little different from what made the bad bookkeepers back then. I mean, those people were just unreliable. I couldn't get them to show up. I needed builders, right? I was building this whole billing system for free up. But when we had the idea for Ecom Balance, we did market research. We do that before we start any company. And we actually interviewed 100 e-commerce sellers. And you can find these interviews on the Ecom Balance blog if you go to ecombalance.com/blog. And we asked them questions like, who do you use? Who are the bookkeepers in the space? What do you like about them? What do you not like about them? What are you paying? And the biggest issues that people had is, first of all, the bookkeepers just didn't understand e-commerce. There are plenty of good bookkeepers out there that just don't understand e-commerce. They're not familiar with cost of goods sold and inventory and the different sales channels and fees that go with Amazon and Shopify and all that different things. So make sure that you're not just hiring a local bookkeeper that has never worked with an e-commerce client before. You don't want to be a guinea pig. You don't want to be someone's first e-commerce client. People there should understand, for example, that the top line of your income statement is not the money deposited in your bank account. There's Amazon sales, there's refunds, returns, fees, all these different things before the amount that's deposited into your bank account. And they're usually familiar with linking tools like Link My Books and A2X that actually connect the marketplaces to QuickBooks. So that's a big one there. One thing that we tried to focus on, because I'm not a bookkeeper, Connor's not a bookkeeper, is speaking the language of e-commerce sellers and entrepreneurs. The average entrepreneur does not speak bookkeeper, and the average bookkeeper does not speak entrepreneur and does not speak e-commerce. So we try to create a service that does that and can put things in simple terms as possible. Most entrepreneurs, they hate finance, they dread finance, they don't want to read complicated reports. Everything has to be simple and straightforward, and that goes into how you set up the chart of accounts and how you lay out the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow. And then the last thing is just the hassle. How much work does it take you as an e-commerce business to get a process in place where your bookkeeper has what they need every single month? Are they requesting the same things over and over again, asking the same questions? What are these transactions? Are they doing the integration up front to get the only access to your banks and credit cards so that you don't have to download statements every single month and send it to them? How easy are they making it for clients? So those are a few of them. You can check out the other interviews on the Ecom Balance blog, but the kind of the fun thing of running a bookkeeping business, two bookkeeping businesses, that not being a bookkeeper is we get to put really good bookkeepers in place that understand e-commerce, but build everything around them to try to create that, make that experience good, from getting a quote to customer service to systems, processes, integration, software, all the stuff that most bookkeepers struggle with.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. One thing that, really kind of resonates with me in this moment has to do with the partnership of, a business and the bookkeeper. The bookkeeper, whether they're, internal or external, has a job to do within the business, but their job is in a silo. There needs to be communication within, sometimes multiple departments. So when you have multiple, again, when you have costs coming from all different kinds of departments, you have revenue from different streams. And it seems like, one thing we talk a lot about on this podcast specifically is about, SOPs, standard operating procedures, and making sure that the job that we do over and over is done in the same way to be efficient and to be optimized. So in that vein, when we're talking about bookkeeping for Amazon businesses, what are some of the things that, an Amazon seller can do in order to create an SOP to make sure that, the bookkeeper that we did hire, after this episode, we went out, we hired a new bookkeeper, everything's up to date. How do we make sure, what can we do to make sure that they are getting the information and the reports they need, at the right time? They're not always sending an email for a follow-up and waiting days to get a response. And what can we do in order to avoid those kinds of situations?
Yeah, so I like to think of everything as a process. So you have your monthly bookkeeping process, which I'll talk about in a second, but it starts with the right setup. If you don't have the right setup, you can have the best bookkeeper in the world, but it's still going to be super clunky and take up a lot of your time. And that means business bank accounts, business credit cards. That means not intermingling personal and business where you're just charging dog food to your business accounts. It means using banks that allow view-only access. You'd be surprised. Some of the big banks don't do that. And you might be looking for these crazy reward points, but you're just creating a lot of work every single month for your bookkeeper and for yourself. So get that right setup. I know a lot of people think of like Profit First, or you have all these different bank accounts. I like to think that simpler is better. I don't think you need 10 bank accounts and 10 credit cards to run most businesses. So the fewer bank accounts and credit cards you have, business view-only access, using the right bookkeeping software. You want to be using QuickBooks Online or Xero. Those are the main two. There's other ones out there. You're going to run into a lot of issues with those, either outgrowing them, or you're going to run into a situation where there's only one bookkeeping service that use that, and then you're trapped with them. Or if you want to switch, you're going to struggle to hire bookkeepers that use that software. And you have to have that linking tool, either Link by Books or A2X, that allows you to connect to the marketplaces. So spend a little extra time making sure that you have that right setup. Find a bookkeeper that understands e-commerce and get into a good monthly rhythm where the month ends, you get charged by your bookkeeper, and then by the 15th of the month, you're getting an income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statement that are easy to read, easy for you to understand, and that bookkeeper should help integrate you. They should get view-only access to banks, credit cards, marketplaces, loans, all these different accounts that you might have. You might have payment processors like Stripe and PayPal. Go through that list. Make sure they have everything, every single account that you use in your business, and that those accounts are only used for that business if you have multiple companies and that you're not mixing them with personal. It's only going to waste time if down the line they're like, oh, by the way, I have this PayPal loan that I never told you about. So make sure you have a complete list, keep it as simple as possible, and get in that good monthly rhythm. If you have a bookkeeper that is constantly late, that's constantly asking those same questions over and over, that's delaying stuff, those are signs that you need to get a good bookkeeper and focus on that process that just repeats itself every single month. And at the end of the year, tax season's easy, right? Because by the time January 15th comes around, your books for the previous year are all done, and you don't have to wait till March and be scrambling to pass over your books to your CPA every
year. Yeah. And I think that, when it comes down to, just to kind of add on what you're saying, and when it comes down to process, it's important that we realize that processes are like living, breathing things in our business. And one of the things, working with accountants and bookkeepers over the years, one of the important things to remember is that as a functioning part of your business, working on a process that's living and breathing, there needs to be an opportunity for feedback. So building that into, if you have a monthly meeting with your bookkeeper or every other month, sitting down and saying, all right, this is what we worked on, what worked well, what didn't work well, like where can we improve, it are all super important things to do. And then we can make sure that we are continuing to oil the machine, optimize the process in order to be done, like you said, by January 15th. That's super, super.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, they lose sight of why they're doing bookkeeping. Selling your business, getting funding, getting investments, can't do those without clean books. Making tax season less stressful, super important as well. But the real thing is being able to make decisions every single month based on what the numbers are telling you. There's no avoiding that. That is the number one thing. Most people are not going to get funding. They're not going to sell their business. One way or another, they're going to be able to file their taxes. The real difference maker is the entrepreneurs and the e-commerce sellers that can make good decisions. And we have a monthly finance meeting that we have every single month. We've been doing it every month for the past 6 years. We do it for every single company. You can grab our agenda for it if you go to ecombalance.com/agenda. Take ours, create your own, tweak it, whatever you got to do, put it on your calendar. Do not miss it for any reason. And every single month, you get your books by the 15th, you have that meeting, and that's the meeting that you make decisions. That's the meeting you decide, hey, I should hire more people. I should cut this expense. I should increase PPC. Whatever those decisions are, you're not making them based off gut. You're not making them by looking at your bank account. You're making them by looking at the income statement, balance sheet, cash flow. And in this meeting, you're looking at trends. You're comparing this month to last month, this month to the same month last year. You're looking at margins, gross and net. You're looking at different platforms that you sell on and making sure that they're worth your time and energy, because the more that you spread yourself out, you can end up in a situation where you're spreading yourself too thin. So all these things are part of that meeting, and it's so important that you have it. And for the e-commerce sellers that dread finance, you just got to put it on your calendar and make sure you have it no matter what.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. The hardest thing to do, actually, one of the easiest things to do, in personal life is to procrastinate, is to do that. Like, I love putting aside the things that I don't want to do the most. But oftentimes what you find is the things at the top of the list are the things that you don't want to do the most, which is almost means it's more important to put the effort out and get it done. And I think that one of the things that when we're talking about, the financial aspect and decision-making and why we're doing things like this, I'll just say for, the audience that will be listening to this podcast is a whole range of people. There are going to be like the entrepreneurs that are really go get them, that are thinking about how do I exit, how do I scale, how do I do this kind of stuff. And then there's also the entrepreneurs that are out there who are happy, having that steady cash flow come in. They get to live the life that they want to live and use that as their main income stream and as their job rather than, taking it all. And the thing that I'll add to everything that you're saying, Nathan, is like, it's important to realize that regardless of what your goal is, this is a critical part to maintaining, a healthy business so you can continue to have your goal, whether your goal be, scaling, increasing your MRR every month and eventually selling to somebody or a company, or if it's to make sure that you're, having money come in, paying your bills, keeping the roof over your head, and doing whatever you want to do on the side, whether it's, taking care of health plans or a family or whatever, or anything in between those two options. It's a whole spectrum. But this is a key to business health and ensuring that you get to do what you want to do on a regular basis.
Yeah, and it's all the same. The same things that help you if you ever get audited are the same things that are going to help you get funding and investments or sell your company. And I mean, our due diligence for selling Free Up, it was 6 months long. Super stressful, most stressful 6 months of my life. And that's with clean and immaculate books where we could answer every single question and we knew our numbers. Like if you have messy books, you're not going to be able to sell your company. And the last thing you want to do is want to sell your company or have an opportunity to sell your company. And the thing holding you back is you have to pay a bookkeeper and wait months and months for them to go backwards and clean everything up. So it's way easier to start now. And we're filming this in February. I don't know when it's going to launch, but even if you just have your CPA and talk to your CPA first, but just file past year's taxes based on the information you give them and just be clean from this January going forward, years down the line, you're going to be happy that you made that move, even if you don't do that bookkeeping in the first few years. So now is the time to start if you haven't already, and getting that mentality. If you start a business, you have to do clean bookkeeping from day one.
Yeah, agreed. And, when it comes down to good bookkeeping, one way that's important to remember is that, they're essentially numbers, it's data, right? And, going back to your original thought of having these numbers in order to make financial decisions, or decisions in general, it's super important to have those in place so you can make it. You had mentioned that in the past, you had to make the choice between continuing to use a software provider or building it out yourself, or bringing on, new roles in order to understand that this is going to make me more money or save me more time. We outsource things all day, whether we like it or not. From the littlest things in our world, we use like CRMs, which is a customer relationship management tool, just something to be a database of our communications. We can do it. It's something that, at SellerSnap, we likely have the ability to build, but we're not going to go do it. You go pay HubSpot or Zoho or Salesforce in order to do it for you. And so in the terms of decision making, that's a conscious decision that we make on a regular basis. In terms of, some of these data points and some of the financial or some of the decisions that we make based off our finances, in the e-commerce world as a business owner, what are some of the things that you look at in order to make those decisions based off of your finances?
Yeah, I mean, with e-commerce sellers, you're dealing with a lot of vanity metrics, right? There's a lot of people that are 7, 8 figure sellers. And what does that really mean? What are your margins? How much profit are you actually making? And that's really the key to all of it. And if your margins are going in the wrong direction, or they're small, or they're not existent, it means you either have to increase prices or decrease expenses or the cost of your product. And I try to keep it simple. I think that's where a lot of e-commerce sellers struggle. They're making all these sales, but they don't actually know what they're making per marketplace per month, and their margins are trending in the wrong directions. Amazon is increasing their fees. Their manufacturers are increasing prices. So these are things that, whether you're an e-com business or not, even if you're a brick and mortar store or digital agency or whatever it is, it's important. But when you have less control of it because Amazon's a big player and they're changing their fees and increasing them, it becomes so important that you are on top of this stuff. And yes, you can go through your expenses every single month and see what expenses you're paying for and make decisions there and make payroll decisions and decide to launch on Amazon France and all that different things. But you need to be focused, laser focused on your margins every single month and be looking at trends and understand what is causing your margins to go up and down and what are the things that you have control of versus the things that you don't. And that's really the key. And it was the same thing 5 years ago for Amazon sellers. It'll be the same thing 5 years from now. Amazon just has so much power and the ability to increase fees that you have to not just look at top line sales, you have to look at the margins.
Totally. I speak to a lot of sellers on a regular basis. One of the things I often have to remind people, I have to remind the sellers is that, revenue isn't the thing that keeps the lights on. The profit is. You can sell $250,000 worth of sales in a month, but really be selling every single item at a loss and you're losing money. So, vanity metrics is something that we really, really have to steer clear of. And, it's super important to keep an eye on. And I think that, Amazon fees are something that really hurt sellers and they're always adding more and making more complicated to understand. And I think that, from a financial standpoint, understanding those metrics are super important, but also understanding that every decision that Amazon makes in terms of, was Amazon more enticing for the end customer can have negative impacts on your business. I saw something this past week where Amazon started to make it easier for customers to get automatic replacements from FBM sellers, from fulfilled by merchant sellers. So basically, if you have an FBM item in stock and the customer wants a replacement within the first 30 days for one of the pre-approved reasons, Amazon just approves it and you're expected to send it out. And so these are small things that, depending on how you operate your business, you might not think of. So, and these are the things that, I'm guessing a good bookkeeper should be able to help you identify. And I think then that's one of the differences in having a bookkeeper that understands the Amazon world and the world of e-commerce differs from one who just understands, whatever world that they lived in. And if, I guess my question is kind of moving in towards the end of this episode is like, what are my options as an Amazon seller in terms of softwares? Are there marketplaces to find these kinds of bookkeepers? Are there, job boards? Where do I start if I need to start here?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of job boards. There's Upwork, Fiverr, FreeUp, you name it. There's bookkeepers all over the place. I mean, obviously, Ecom Balance is an option. If you want to see what a clean e-commerce bookkeeping report looks like, you can go to ecombalance.com/report. It's a sample of what we send to all our clients. You can obviously use us, but you can also give it to your own bookkeeper, give it to your CPA. Say, I want my reports to look like this. And it breaks down fees in a really good way. It's super easy to read and for an e-commerce seller to understand it, in my opinion, and a lot of our client CPA opinions, they love it. And yeah, I mean, don't settle. Make sure you have, even like if you look at the top lines of that report, make sure you have Amazon fees broken down. Make sure that you have accurate cost of goods. Like these are basic things that are very unique to e-commerce sellers that the average bookkeeper doesn't understand. So don't settle and continue to work with your own bookkeeper to get reports that look like this.
Yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense. Oftentimes we might think that we were talking about in the beginning of this conversation that you need to find someone who knows how to do bookkeeping so you can focus on the things that you're good at and in terms of, running your business. But on the flip side, whenever we ask someone to do a job for us within our own businesses, it's important to help guide them. And so finding resources like Ecom Balance and the free content and the templates that you put out, and I'm sure there's others out there as well, is one of the things that is a really tangible thing that you could do at the end of this episode to help guide, your current efforts in the right direction. So, it's really great that, Ecom Balance and Nathan, you guys put that kind of stuff out. And it's important that everybody knows that that stuff is readily available on the internet to help guide your non-ecom, geared CPA or bookkeeper, in the right direction to, again, help you make really smart financial decisions for your company. But Nathan, as we kind of wind down this episode, I just wanted to kind of throw the mic back to you, so to speak, about kind of your final thoughts around, bookkeeping and e-commerce. What are the things that we should be looking out for? What changes can we make, today in order to help us, reach our goals?
Yeah, I mean, keeping it simple. I know we kind of started the episode saying that, but keeping your finance and your whole setup as simple as possible. Spend extra time now switching banks, reducing credit cards, getting the right software, getting away from the benches.com of the world that either don't understand e-commerce or you're just using their software that no one else uses, and just get that proper setup and spend time finding that right bookkeeping service, whether it's Ecom Balance or something else. Down the line, you're going to be thankful you did it. Once it's in place, it should run on autopilot every single month. And it's not something that's going to go away. It's just going to become a bigger and bigger mess as you delay it and avoid it. So spend that time now. Beginning of the year is a great time to do it. And down the line, you're really going to thank yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really great insight. And what do they say when you're growing up in school? They're always like, use the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. And that's so legit. And, being able to, no one cares about your business as much as you do. And so it's important to, as Nathan is mentioning, set yourself up for success down the line, whether you want to continue to just operate your business or eventually exit. Keeping it simple, setting yourself up for success will allow you to get there. And because bookkeeping and accounting is the backbone of your business, because, businesses are around to make money, and it's a web of credit cards and bank accounts and statements and reports that we can't untangle. We can't make those decisions, and it makes it really difficult. So Nathan, I wanted to thank you, especially for being on this episode of Not Another Ecom Podcast, and we hope to have you back soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And if anyone wants to connect with me on social media, find me Nathan Hirsch. I love just meeting and connecting with other people in the e-commerce space.
There you have it. Look for Nathan across all your social tools. And thank you for listening to this episode of Not Another Ecom Podcast. We'll catch you next time.